Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. Arthur Nobel, Principal at Knight VC. Welcome, Arthur.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Really looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, good to have you here. So something pretty amazing has happened sort of recently, Arthur. You've got a book out, and you've been working a long time to speak to a lot of people in SaaS around how do you grow, how do you scale a SaaS business, right? And effectively, I think, like, how do you get to 10 million, and more. So excited about that. Also grateful that I was able to contribute in some way as well. So very thankful that I was one of 47, I think, in that. And there's so much like amazing data and kind of stories and information that's come out of that, of which we obviously don't have time to go through all of it, but we obviously the book will be available and we can tell people where to kind of share that. But today we're going to go into some of the kind of interesting points and topics around that. But before we do, Arthur, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about Knight Capital. Yeah, let's learn it. Like, who's Arthur Nobel?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alex. So I'm Arthur. I'm I would say operator turned VC turned founder turned VC again. That's my background in short. Now, I started in the startup world back in 2014 at Rocket Internet. Learned a bunch there, and then joined in 2015, 2016 a seed fund and a Series B fund. So it gave me like different perspectives on different business models. And from there, I run my own company, which is called FlexPath, where we try to enable remote work to the masses. I mean, one thing I learned from that market timing is everything. So the why now question is something I like to ask as an investor. And then fast forward, I specialized in growth, go-to-market strategies, and then last year joined Knight Capital. A little bit about Knight Capital. It's a European B2B software investor, specialized, I would say, in go-to-market topics, and we're all former entrepreneurs. I would say we invest all across Europe, usually Series A, Series B. So this 1 to 10 million phase is something we're pretty excited about, and we try to help entrepreneurs to get through that stage.
Amazing. And what gave you the idea to do the book and put yourself through this and interviewing 47 people to get a book done?
Yeah, it was, in all honesty, it was a bit of an opportunistic idea. I know one of these things where you start brainstorming with the team, like, hey, it would actually be good to write a book, and then it turns out to be a little bit bigger than expected. But what we saw we were having founders ourselves, so we have had the problems with scaling. We're regularly talking with founders, and we get some questions. From there, we started diving into this bigger topic of scaling a company, and we figured out that on the one hand there is a lot of content on the product market fit and, for instance, like Eric Ries has done a great job on there, and on the other hand there's a lot of content on, let's say, big successes, companies raising like hundreds of millions or just doing multi-billion exits. But actually, even if they look back on their period of Series A to Series C, it's usually still quite a few years ahead in time. So we felt that this sort of in-between period, let's call it Series A to C, where it's really about scaling and basically making the company, laying the foundation for this great success, is something that's not really talked about a lot in a sort of coherent way. And afterwards, we found out that the Deal Room did a study that from the companies that raise a seed round, only 7% actually manages to raise a Series C round. So we really see that there is a challenge with scaling a company, which of course has external factors, but definitely also internal factors.
Well, it leads nicely to the first point, like, why companies have a problem with scaling. And it was certainly one of the stories that I shared with you about, SaaStock and the problems that we had about scaling, which we won't go into, but again, it's in the book if people want to sort of read that. But again, it's such a common problem. Scaling kills a lot of companies. But why? What are the problems that you learned from this book?
So there are many categories of problems, but just to address the question a bit broader, I see like on the one hand, there are like lots of strategic challenges, like, you know, for instance, which country do we enter? And if you then enter too many countries at the same time with limited amount of money, you know, you run out of money quickly. So those, I would say, on the strategic angle, and you can think about a few more things like internationalization, you know, which verticals you touch on, etc. But one of the things I like to focus on is also like the internal perspective, like, you know, what can you do as an organization? Yeah, on the first hand, you know, it's just incredibly hard to scale, you know, going from 20 to 100 or 30 to 100 people over a period of 2-3 years, or sometimes even faster. That's, you know, incredibly hard. And the reason why it's hard, I thought, like one of Katie Christensen mentioned in the book, that, you know, there is actually no playbook available. And I would also say most companies, if you talk with them as an investor, I see there is like a product roadmap, but there is usually no scaling roadmap available. So I do think it's also one of these things that we quickly like to think in sort of functional silos, like, you know, in sales and marketing and customer success and whatever else, but not a lot about, you know, how do we actually scale a company from point A to point B. And also, of course, like lots of people do it for the first time. So that also makes it incredibly hard.
Can we maybe pick a couple of the common scaling challenges and maybe go, you know, in depth into a few of those?
No, definitely. It's always a challenge here to never be too elaborate. I'll try my best. So first, to classify them a bit, I identified six main buckets. So the first one is, for instance, the function of a department. The second one is the people challenge. The third one is the documentation challenge. The fourth is the process challenge. Then fifth, we have the tooling challenge. And then the sixth bucket I identify as the data or KPI challenge. So if I just give like a few examples of each and every one. So what you really see if you start with the function of a department, you just see that, for instance, an organization, if it has a 1 million ARR, and 1 million ARR business has like a different focus than a 10 million ARR business. For instance, if you talk about HR, in the beginning, you're focused a lot on recruiting. Let's say the 10 million ARR company, onboarding and basically performance plans, etc., also have become important. So I think the first thing is what people have to realize is what is the function of your department where you are today, and based on that, basically build everything behind it. I think that's just, it's not really a challenge, but it's something which is very important to be aware. What is necessary and what stage. So if I go to the real first challenge, I would say is the people challenge. And this is like a huge bucket. So just to give like a few examples, what you see is that the people that you have in the seed round are usually different people than the people you need in the Series A or Series B. So in the beginning, you know, the skill sets are very broad, but over time, you know, it gets more about being like in-depth skill sets. And then you also get like different people, different personalities. And then you also get some conflicts here and there. How do you manage the people from the seed stage, which you still need? But on the other hand, you also need to get people from a more later stage in your company so that they can help you within the next 12 to 24 months. So that was something I saw as a fundamental challenge, which many people mentioned. Another one that was mentioned often was that you need to have sort of the right mix between, let's call it newbies, and people who have done it before. So with that, you can think about people who have gone through the scaling challenge, and people, you know, even if they have like a rich corporate career, who do everything for the first time, so we don't know what to prepare for. Of course, can talk much more about the people challenge, but this is just like two things I came across quite often. The documentation challenge, let me give like a nice example of Joao Graça. He is the CTO of Unbubble, and what he said, like they created a dummy variable in the code, in their code base somewhere, and then 1.5 years later, people didn't dare to touch this dummy variable anymore because they didn't understand the context and everything around it. So what he said, like there is a big challenge for a company if you don't document everything, because then people start doing everything at the same time, like over and over. So documentation is key. And just to go like a bit quickly through the other ones, like the process challenge is really about, I think what you mentioned, Alex, is like building this organizational OS, because after 20 people, things start breaking down if you don't have processes in place, which I really liked. The tooling challenge is really about your company changes every 6 to 12 months. So what I see is that people first start, let's say, with implementing Pipedrive, then they switch to HubSpot, and then they start implementing Salesforce. And basically being aware what type of tooling that you need ahead in time. I think that is something I saw as a fundamental challenge, as well as just defining your stack. And the last one, the data challenge, is really about how are you data driven, and how do you base basically your gut feel. On the other hand, which metrics are important in a given stage. So let's say a seed stage company doesn't need to measure so much the LTV CAC, the lifetime value to acquisition cost ratio. Whereas if you are in a Series C company, you definitely have to focus on that. So every stage has relevant metrics to focus at. I think that was also an important thing to prepare for that, knowing what is relevant for a Series A company, and then already start preparing it in your seed stage. Not because you have to measure, you have to monitor on it right now, but just be able to scale on it once you arrive at that point.
And that also then leads into the next point in terms of, say, scaling it's not one stage, it's not 0 to 10, but you have your seed stage, your Series A, your B, your C. And so on. And also, I guess, for those that are bootstrapping, right, it's still, your 0 to 1 million and 1 to 3 and so on, right? So it's this continuing with maturity stages. So breaking that sort of down in terms of like these various different stages and the important things to do, perhaps like within that, or the things to be considerate of.
Yeah, I think a really good point. Well, maybe I thought that myself as well, but what I've definitely it comes across to me if I read a lot of blogs, etc., is that it's perceived like you get a product market fit, and afterwards you start scaling, and you happily scale ever after. But I do think that I break down scaling into, I would say, like five stages, which is called sort of the ad hoc stage. Usually you start at in this bootstrap stage, you just start doing things, which is good. But then after some time, you get to the initial process stage. You start just building up your first initial processes. Let's say you start doing customer success via Slack. And then at some point, you get into the replicability stage. I would usually say this is like the Series A stage as well, where it's really about, can you do sales in a replicable way, get the same type of customers in a replicable way. But then if you move towards Series B and Series C, it's about predictability. Like, can you predict your results? And can you really scale, for instance, your salespeople with the quotas and the ramp up times? And that you can really predict, okay, I have this euro and I'm going to allocate it in XYZ. And I would say after the Series B, C stage, it really depends on the company. I would say you really enter this scalability stage, where you are post 25 million ARR, trying to grow to 50 to 100 million ARR, and do everything at scale. And the difference with the former stages is that you are operating in many countries, operating in many verticals, operating in different customer segments, like SME, mid-market, enterprise, dependent on your business model, of course. But you do everything at scale, but essentially the same thing as you were doing on a small scale in your Series A and B stage.
So something you thought about, at the output of, when the book was completed, was about the possibility of having a role within a business, which was the head of scaling, and perhaps not necessarily seeing that, specifically defined sort of role so far, so within the market. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's somehow interesting when you started talking with founders and operators, all these functional leaders in a way. you quickly start seeing also for my investment practice is that you have very strong functional heads. For instance, someone who's really good in doing sales and growing that, or like very good in HR. But it's not necessarily that that there is a lot of experience on how to scale the processes and building this department from the one level to the other. I think that's partially sometimes also has to do for more early stage companies. It's because they don't have the money to hire people who can actually do it. Let's say you need such person costs 150 to 200k pounds a year. Yeah, you cannot easily afford that. So you end up with very strong functional heads who don't have like this really process, I would say almost McKinsey like way of approaching things. So what I came to believe after talking with people is that the COO role is very focused on the present, I would say, usually just making sure the business runs at the moment. But that it would be very interesting is to consider hiring a head of scaling, someone who has like a horizontal focus across the entire organization and is looking 6 to 12 months ahead in time and prepares all types of processes, documentations, onboarding manuals to make the organization ready for the next stage. And finally, as preparation for like another talk I did recently, I started looking on LinkedIn, like how many people do actually have a head of scaling title. And I figured out there were only 44 people had a title. And even from that group, many of them didn't have the role that I just described. So it's interesting that this is not well covered yet in the scene.
With the head of scaling, the 44 people, were they mainly in SaaS or were they all sorts of companies?
I saw a few from more like venture studios, those type of roles. I don't know in all honesty whether they had a SaaS background, but it would make a lot of sense actually because the SaaS playbook is more well known compared to maybe other business models.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then we mentioned that there was 47 leaders that you spoke to. So maybe can you name, obviously not all 47, because that would be pretty remarkable, but maybe some of the people that were in the book to help, in terms of sort of like recognition, and then maybe some of the interesting stories or things that they kind of shared that would be valuable for our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things, I'm just going like a bit like left and right from some things which I just personally really liked. But one of them is Mitja Brackstone. He was the co-founder of Chorus, which was recently acquired by Zoom Info.
Yep.
And what he said, like when I was like a young company, and I wanted to get like a very senior leader, which I couldn't get in my own imagination. I just asked the person that said like, hey, basically, if I want to hire you in like 3 years' time, how would I need to get you in this position? And sometimes people were then open and said, okay, hey, I'm actually already open to join a company right now, but just not have this sort of these mental boundaries, but ask it like in a very open way. It's something I found very inspiring to really get C-level talent in your company. And a thing I really like from Mark Roberts, the CRO from HubSpot, is that he was talking about the hiring pace. So what I personally see a lot is then when people raise funding, then post around they start hiring lots of people. Let's say the whole sales team is hired. But what Mark suggested was to start with a certain pace. So let's say the first 6 months after you have a go-to-market fit, let's say Series A type of business, hire 2 sales reps a month for 6 months. Then if they manage to perform, then for the next 6 months, start with four salespeople a month. If that works after 6 months, start with 8. And the good thing is that you really build like a talent pool with that. And also you don't get lots of salespeople like at one point, which is also like hard to manage from a culture point of view. But also once you start like scaling up, you get more experience over time, which I think was a very strong point. And what I particularly liked from Bill Makaitis, he was like the former CRO of Zendesk and Slack, is that he focuses on shared metrics. So when you are, let's say, in the seed or Series A stage company, you don't have too many people in an organization. But once you, let's say, get to Series B, maybe you have like 100 people, just as an example, and you raise like a big round, so you get like big targets. Everyone just starts working very hard on meeting them, and you quite quickly can get siloed. And at that point, it actually makes a lot of sense to think about, what are shared metrics that they can align marketing, sales, and customer success in one thing, rather than marketing, for instance, delivering bad leads for sales, and get into that whole discussion, which is often discussed. And also, I think at that point, it starts really making sense to think about the CRO function and other shared functions. So I think that those were just 3 points among the many that I think were very interesting.
Who was the most interesting person that you spoke to, that you learned the most from?
From you, Alex.
I doubt that, but very, very kind of you. But yeah, who did you ever come away from a call with any particular person and just say, wow, that was amazing?
Someone I learned a lot from on the go-to-market perspective was Matt Chappell. He was working at that time for Legion Technologies. I think he gave like a very good overview of sales. Someone like Felix Eichler from Userlane, I think he's still very, very young, and he gave such a sort of mature answer on things like culture and on HR. I think those were just two people, as well as, for instance, John O'Sottom who explained the bar raiser concept really well, which I think added to the former tree. I think really gave me a lot of great insights.
Awesome, good stuff. So where can our listeners, if they want to get the book, where can they find it? How can they get access? How can they read this book?
Oh, definitely. That's really interesting. So if you go to Amazon, either Amazon.com or Amazon.nl or DE or Amazon.co.uk, you just type in Leaders of Growth. There you'll find the book. It's an ebook, so you can just download it on your Kindle, or you just download the Kindle app on your smartphone, and from there you can buy it.
And if people buy it, do I understand, like, proceeds go to charity? Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. So like as a VC, it's not our business model to make money out of this. So we thought let's just think about the good cause, and we came up with an oncology center in the Netherlands that focuses on children that have cancer, and they try to treat them and do a lot of research. So we dedicate all proceeds to that. So it's not just our revenue or our profits, it's just all revenues.
Yeah, so it's amazing, and a great cause there. So not only will listeners be able to learn from 47 amazing experts that will help them with scaling, but all the money goes to a fantastic cause as well. So that's great stuff. Will you be writing another book, Arthur? Are you taking a break? Is that it? One and done?
Oh, actually, I learned a lot from this book. For instance, also I did this sort of buckets where you see the scaling challenges, and I have thought about, I would say I have now a generalizable framework, but I want to make things more concrete, more tangible, and more practical. So it's not to be launched in the next 2, 3, or 6 months, but I'm planning to write another book on this topic. You've got the bug.
You've got the bug, as they say.
Exactly, definitely.
Good stuff. And where can people find you online specifically?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Arthur Nobel. Please reach out to me and try to respond to any message that I get. And in terms of email, it's arthur@night.vc.
Cool, good stuff. Well, Arthur Nobel, thank you so much for being on the podcast, creating such an awesome resource for the SaaS founders that are looking to grow their business, and then doing amazing things in terms of generating and donating the profits to this fantastic charity. So great stuff. Thanks so much for taking the time today on the SaaS Revolution Show, and look forward to reading the book in full as well. So thanks so much, Arthur.
Thanks a lot, Alex. I really had a blast here. It was great to talk to you. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, and also for contributing with your amazing insights in the book.
Thanks. No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Happy to help. Thank you so much.